I'm tired of y'all buying up all my saved homes on Zillow. I was gonna buy it. I just needed $990,000 more dollars, but I was gonna buy it.
Housing market is cooked and prices are plummeting. And the question is are prices plummeting in the housing markets that you want to buy a house in? And are prices going to continue to go down? So today's video is going to be on all those things. We're going to start by talking about macro data so we can take a look at how bifurcated the housing market is. Then we're going to go into the micro data so I can show you guys exactly how to find a house that's potentially under market value. So we'll go into Kingwood, and we're going to end by taking a look and listening to a video by Breaking Point where he's absolutely slamming boomers on how all they want to do is eliminate property taxes because they're so selfish. Now, today's co-host is a very special co-host. It is Melody Wright, and what I'll be doing, you guys, at the end of each segment, I will be asking her certain questions about the housing market, including when she plans on buying a home herself. Melody Wright, how are you, and are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go, and I'm doing well, Travis. How are you?
I'm delighted to see you, and I am happy now that you're here, Melody. And having said that, happy Wednesday. Let's start by talking about macro data, starting with demand. Taking a look at the purchase index versus the 30-year fix. This is from Mortgage News Daily. Now, this is the 5-year outlook, and the demand is essentially in that gray, bluish kind of lines right there. The interest rates is the orange golden line. But what I wanted to show you guys is the demand in the housing market right now is not there. There's almost no demand to purchase houses right now. And in a lot of metro areas, that's one primary reason why, in my opinion anyways, and we can ask Melody this, there's no price discovery yet. But demand is barely up right now. It's not even up. But look at where we were at, you guys, before quantitative tightening, way up here. Taking a look at inventory, which is also very important. Here's active listings. This is not new homes. This is only existing homes that are active on the market, so not counting pending. Right now, we're sitting at 1.1 million active listings. And look at kind of how it plateaued. We may have one more month of plateau, but seasonally, it's probably going to start going down. But what I wanted to point out is we now officially have more inventory than we did pre-pandemic. You guys can see here, December of 2019, we had a little over 1 million active listings. So right now we have 1.1, which means at the start of 2026, we should have much more inventory than we did prior to lockdown, because again, you just saw demand is in the gutter. Here's monthly supply of new homes not existing. This takes into account demand and units, and it comes up with the supply. So right now, this is saying, and this is kind of crazy, that they haven't come out with the data for October. They skipped October, you guys. But right now it's saying we have 7.4 months. Now that's actually declined greatly. We had this massive drop here. It's still over 6 months. We've had over 6 months, which is an indicator of a buyer's market. We've had that with new homes for, I think, going on 3 years right now. That's why new home prices are plummeting. And if you don't believe me, just access Lennar's earnings. They will tell you that the prices for their new homes are below 2019. According to Daily Mail, the number one buyer's market, according to them, for August 2025 is actually Miami, which is sitting at almost 10 months. Look at on the bottom here, 10 months of supply. Melody, when did that happen? And look at Orlando. Orlando's between 7 and 9 months. Austin between 7.5. Riverside, that's in California, Southern California. Tampa, Jacksonville, New York is on here. Nashville, Raleigh, we've been there. Denver, my hometown of Houston, 6 months, 5.5 to 6 months of inventory. Things are changing. Now, when we look at the metro areas with the sharpest price decline from peak, here's what the map looks like according to Black Knight. Some of this stuff, you guys, is absolutely atrocious. You can kind of see the bifurcation in the United States of America. Obviously, the northeast is still going up in prices. I'm saying, Melody's saying, be very careful. It's probably a trap. It's forever debt. Be very, very careful. But when it comes to housing markets that we already know are declining, here's some of the top declining housing markets. And this does not count small metro areas. This is only the top metro areas. And you guys can see the number one metro, Austin, down from peak 21.7%. That's down $128,000. But remember, you guys, not in every subdivision in Austin you're going to find a deal like that. And also in the housing markets that are going up in price, not all the homes are going up in price. So you got to know how to look under the covers. But Cape Coral is number 2, down almost 15% or 66,000 from peak. Northport is number 3, down 14.5% or $72,000. Number 4 is San Francisco, down from peak 9.3%. You guys, that is $116,000 from peak. Number 5, San Antonio, down 7.1%, totaling 24,000. Number 6 is Phoenix, Arizona, down 6.7% or 34,000 from peak. Tampa, Florida, down 5.6% or $22,800 from peak. The negative equity rate by market. So this is telling you and telling us how many mortgages are underwater and have negative equity. And I want you guys to take a big, long look at Texas and Florida, because in certain places in Florida, 11% of all mortgages are underwater. Melody, I'm probably going to get in trouble because anytime I have you on my show, people are like, oh, let Melody talk, just shut up. But like, you're co-hosting and I was presenting the data. So please, if you're listening to the viewers, don't get mad at me. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to do the best I can. Melody. Okay. So there's this huge debate with some people, okay, on price versus payment. Mm-hmm. I've been screaming at the rooftops, price is more important than payment. It's always 99.99% of the time, it's more than payment. It's more important than payment. Can you explain, Melody, why, in your opinion, that price is more important than payment? And then maybe you want to respond to any of the data that I just went over on a macro level.
Yeah, so I mean, we've become this payment economy where, you know, oh, if I can afford the payment, I can afford the house. The problem is that you're assuming you're going to keep your job. You're assuming that inflation is not going to make your food more expensive. You're assuming a whole bunch of things that actually, you know, right now what we're seeing are the worst layoffs since 2003. So the idea that you're going to keep your job, that is a huge assumption. And so personally, price to me matters the most. What's happened is it's become completely distorted because the housing market has become about speculators and investors. It's not about just regular Americans getting a home. And that started, quite frankly, at the end of the last crisis when the agencies, the government-sponsored agencies, invited Wall Street in to buy up those homes off their balance sheets of the banks because they were freaking out about this foreclosure crisis. Had that not happened, Travis, we would have actually seen home prices fall significantly lower, and they would once again match household median price to household median income. But right now we're so distorted from that you can look at historical charts, and if we know that the household median income in the United States is around $83,000. If you put down a 20% down payment, if you have a little reserves in the bank, if you're cautious and prudently don't take out more than 30% of your take-home pay, then that's a home around $300,000. Right now, the existing median home price is around $422,000, something like that. But as you say, the builders are now below that $400,000 mark. But that's still not affordable. And so, yes, price matters way more than payment. Payment is, this is when I say, look at an amortization schedule, right? You have to look at it. And then you understand why that payment is really going to bite you. But one of the charts that you brought up, Travis, I'd love for you to bring back up, and that's the purchase chart with the 30-year mortgage rate, the very first one that you showed. If you could actually do that to the max, all the way up to the top left-hand corner, you can choose, I think, max, like the longest time series. All right, this is what everybody needs to understand. This is called the law of diminishing return. People, those in power have always sort of in our recent interest rate policy regime turned to housing to turn things around. And what did they do? They broke the consumers when they do that. They broke regular Americans. So you look that this last little boomlet didn't even come close to the boom that we had in the GFC. And so I think we are hitting what I would call the law of diminishing return in terms of the housing market not able to put the juice back into the economy as it's done so before. So I just wanted to give people that historical perspective as well.
Melody, can you, and this has been a huge topic. I think this is one of the most important questions to ask in our current economy and current housing market. Can you kind of hypothesize on why there's such drastic bifurcation in the housing market? And I'm not talking about price and payment. Okay, those are historically bad in pretty much every housing market. But I'm talking more specifically about inventory and, active inventory and prices and the trajectory of those prices and the trajectory of that inventory. Why is it so bifurcated?
Well, I think, like you say, you have to look at the micro data. And, I track 85 markets across the country, and each one has its own sort of story. Like we know what the story is in the Sun Belt states. We've beaten that to death. That's the builders went bananas. They weren't paying attention. They got over, they overbuilt. It is so clear from what we have seen, right? And also they banked on population growth that in many ways was temporary. It was the people coming in to build those homes. Sure, you had some migration from California and New York, but in reality, that trend started long ago, like in the middle 2000s. And so we got a little hyper, more of it during COVID, but really not as much so that it justified all that building that you and I have seen on the road. Now, that's the South, right? That's Florida, that's Texas, and they went absolutely insane. And it's, it's starting there. It's not going to end there. As you and I know, we went out to California. What's the story in California? What's the story? It's the opposite story of the one in the Sun Belt. Californians are leaving. They just cannot. It is simply too unaffordable to live there. Their insurance has gone up exponentially, even if they aren't in a fire zone. And the home prices completely unrealistic. And really, some of the biggest draw of California, those industries are collapsing, like, in LA. And so you have a negative demographic story. And what so many people think is that somehow the top 10% can sustain our housing market. Well, they're not dumb. The way that you stay rich is by not spending stupid money. And so if you've got 10 homes, but you only visit, 2 of them, you're going to get rid of the other 8 because you're spending so much to sustain that home in taxes, insurance, electricity, maintenance, repair. And so if the top 10% were going to keep the housing market elevated, then why did we have the worst transactions last year since 1995? And, we've increased population by over 20% since then. So, the West, that's a demographic story. And they also have a little building story there, like in Riverside, like you just pointed out. So we are going, and the other story out in California, Travis, as you and I well know, like San Diego particularly, these are low owner occupied markets. What does that mean? There's a lot of investor activity. So for instance, I think San Diego is like a 50%, something like that, owner occupancy rate. That means that you've got a lot of renters and you got a lot of investors, and you're seeing increasing vacancy in a lot of that rental. So you can look at the inventory for rent, and it's crazy as well, just as the inventory for sale. And so those investors are not cash flowing and they're losing money. And so they are going to have to sell. So you've just got a lot of headwinds in the West, and we're seeing the West get hit with these price declines in Seattle as well. Then you come over the Midwest, and the Midwest, they were the last great holdout for the investors, because they could, even as rates were starting to increase, they could convince themselves that because those home prices were so low, that they would be able to invest in those markets and do okay. And so that was a big story after 22. Go invest in Detroit, go invest in Cleveland, Cincinnati. Also, there was going to be some plant, that's the big promise, the Micron plants, things like that. Well, what's happening now? Okay, inventory is exploding across these Midwest cities, because now those investors are realizing, oh, oopsie, I'm not going to be able to cash flow, because these people, their median income is like $45,000. They cannot afford these homes. They can't afford these rents. So that's the Midwest. Now the Northeast is also a demographic story. Oh, the other thing, Midwest, Chicago, we should talk about, and this is a big story in a lot of the cities, certain cities in the West, is that the American Rescue Act sent out a whole bunch of money to these cities, to these states, and they spent like drunken sailors on all these different programs, including, like in Chicago, giving illegal immigrants $15,000 to pay toward rent. In Portland, they would give illegal immigrants $30,000 down payment to buy a home. And so you've got all of this false propping up of the housing market, be it on the rental side or the buying side. So that brings us over to the Northeast, where they had a lot of that as well. But also you have a situation in New York, for instance, there people estimate it's around 50 to 100,000 apartments are being held off market because of a 2019 law that capped what you could increase rent for with rent stabilized apartments. Well, it wasn't enough for people to make the repairs needed to be up to code. So they're at this like stalemate where people are just holding these apartments off the market. And so you have false demand there as well. But the Northeast is a demographic story. You know, you've got older Americans, the boomers, as well as you've just had people leaving these cities because they used to be manufacturing hubs and they're not anymore, or with factories or things like that. And so two demographic stories there. People are leaving the Northeast, as well as you've got a lot of your wealthy boomers in the Northeast who will start to have to offload those properties. And I'm helping several people in the Northeast with inherited properties, trying to either try to keep them or try to sell them because they can't afford them. So it depends on where you are in the country, what is going to, what your situation is, but the entire country is impacted.
Yeah, the entire country is impacted big time, Melody. Now, for the viewers, here's the good news. The math works in every single market. So you don't have to be worried about, oh, what market am I in? What's happening here? What's happening there? Just learn how to do the math. And so that's what I'm going to show you guys right now. Now, usually you're going to want to be a realtor. Usually you're going to need to go through them because the best service to typically use to do a market analysis is the MLS, which is the multiple listing service. However, you can also accomplish what I'm about to show you by using Zillow. Now, let me show you how to condense a whole bunch of data into just a few listings that show us immediately before even looking at the house that they are well under market value. The first thing that we have to do is determine what the market value of a specific city is. And the way to do that is you just look at the sold property. So I select only looking at sold property. And in this particular occasion, I'm going to look at the last sold properties for the last year. And I'm going to look at for the entire city of Kingwood. Now, obviously, I've been teaching you guys about subdivision analysis, so you really got to go hyperlocal. You got to only review the subdivision. But for the sake of this video, I'm doing the entire city. If I wanted to do the subdivision specifically, here's where I would put the subdivision. Now, this is going to print out and give me all of the homes that sold in Kingwood over the last year. 509 properties sold over the last year in only Kingwood. Now, when I add all that together and I divide by 509, it gives me the average square foot. Now, the average price per square foot is not how you determine value, but it is a good method to look at a whole bunch of data and find where the gems are hiding in the hay, or the needle rather, that's in the hay. So what we can say right now, and again, this is just the last year, I would argue go back 4 years, but we know over the last year that homes in Kingwood sell for an average of $150.21 per square foot. Now, another thing I note is the average size of a house in the market, because you want something generally a little bit under the average. Now, the average size is actually huge in this market at 2,904. When I go to Kingwood, here's what all of the active listings look like. And notice how I blocked out all of the other cities. I'm only looking at Kingwood. There's a total of 150 active listings. And you may think that looking at this immediately, it's pretty overwhelming because there's 150 different choices. But the key here is to filter the data. So when I go back into my software, all I'm doing is I'm changing the price per square foot to $80 to $100. Now, I already know that the market is 150, and I want to look at homes that are well well under market value. So I put in only show me homes in Kingwood that are actively being listed for $80 to $100 per square foot. What that does is it takes 150 listings and it gives me these 3 listings right here. So within a matter of seconds, I know that in Kingwood, there are 3 listings that I should take a look at to see whether or not I can buy that house for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 under market value. And you may think, well, that's only 3. I'm going to tell you guys, okay, if you want to know what a full-fledged crash is going to look like, instead of 3 homes here, you're going to see 50 homes. That's the only difference from what I'm showing you right now from a full-fledged nationwide home price crash. I can go up 1 tier and I can look at homes that are between $101 and $120, which gives me a total of 7 properties. So the 3 plus the 7 means that out of 150 homes in Kingwood, about 10 of them are well under market value. In other words, it's 2025. There is no more room to use your emotions when it comes to purchasing things that are hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have to pay back for the rest of your life. So just use the math. And so, Melody, my question for you is simple. When are you going to buy a home?
I'm not exactly sure. I think I'm much closer than I was a couple of years ago. But I'm sort of waiting for a larger market awareness, right? And I think that we're going to start to get that as we enter the selling season next year, as we get to that spring time. And I think that will be, around here, Travis, actually, you can already find deals. You can, we have so much inventory, it's crazy. But I think that what I want is a situation where the seller is aware, and I don't think there is a large awareness now, but I think that probably by the middle of next year, I'm going to be in a better position to start to probably make my first offer for the farm.
And outside of the fact that it's a farm and that alone is really cool, right? And that's a limited amount of inventory. But from like a mathematical standpoint, what are you looking for in a house? Like, what is the most important thing for Melody Wright when it comes to purchasing a house?
Wow. It's being close to my family is number one. Being close to my community of family. And I think number 2 is what's the long-term viability of that? And, is it something I want to leave to, the children in my family? And does it have a purpose? I'm a bit different, it's like, yes, schools matter to me, and we have good schools, but the farm is important to me because I want to do things like grow my own food. I do that already. And I'd like to actually do other things on the farm, probably teach other people how to grow their own food and really learn how to live, sort of more independently. And so it's about purpose. Is it just shelter? Or do you want to do something else? And for me, this farm offers a lot of opportunity of ways that I could help the community. I could even create a CSA. It's something I've thought about where, other people can come farm on the land and we all participate in that. So it's about what I want for my future. And I see this land is offering a whole bunch of opportunity.
Okay. Hypothetically, okay, there's a farm just came up on the market an hour ago, and it's 30% under today's market. We don't know what tomorrow's market is, and that's the point I think you're trying to make. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but today's market is 30% under market value. Does that interest you, or are you still going to hold and kind of just continue to wait this out to see what happens next?
What interests me, so I'm going to do the research and see is it for real?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Is it legit? What's the condition? I gotta, one thing I like about my situation now is that I've I've now been here for 2 years, and I know that we need a new cooling system. I know like the issues with this place. I know what I'm signing up for, and I think that's a big deal. You need to understand. You need to know who your neighbors are. You need to know, what the zoning is. You need to. I mean, there's just so much that needs to go into figuring out if you want that home. If you don't get the opportunity, like I have, to live here and understand exactly what I'm getting when I buy the farm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sure, 30% would interest me. I would go check it out. I would do my homework and my research.
Yeah, very good. And guys, the reason I'm really emphasizing that is because when the housing market officially crashes, everyone's going to know about it. And when everyone knows about it, probably is going to be more activity because prices are going down. Maybe investors want to come in there. So right now is the ideal opportunity for you to learn how to use math just to find a great deal. You don't have to buy a house to make it your investment, but you should purchase it as if it was your investment, because it is your investment, because whether you like it or not, they're going to capitalize and lever up that house and make it very difficult for you to hold on to. And we know that because of property taxes and things of that nature, which brings me to our last segment. We're going to talk about property taxes, and we're going to listen to a breaking point video. And I'm going to break down some of the inconsistencies about what these people are saying about property taxes. This guy, Melody, and I'll get your opinion here in a minute, this guy's out of his mind.
Texas voters today will take to their ballot boxes to vote on a little proposition. Now, that proposition is worded in such a way for property tax relief. Now, who could be against property tax relief, right? Nobody likes paying property taxes. It's horrible. Everybody wants to vote to cut them. But here's the little thing.
That did pass, and it passed a few days ago. So all of the homestead amounts, as we're about to show you here in a second, have passed.
It would also do is cut the school taxes that people who are 65 and up would pay by up to 50%. So the way that this is worded is basically, and by the way, again, I'm under no illusions, this is going to pass 100% because everybody doesn't want to pay property tax. Well, and this gets to what we were talking about earlier, what most people in Texas love is usually like, oh, we have no income tax. Well, okay, that's great. But it means that property tax is going to finance the vast majority of local services.
So far, you guys, he's right. Property taxes in Texas pays for a whole bunch of services. But here's where this man jumps off the deep end.
Who wants to pay for those local services? Well, the people who benefit from those local services, let's say emergency services and others, and they're all financed, and this is a little reductive, but elderly people, by and large, consume a large amount of those services. But what they have decided to do is to rig the property tax system such that they will get their school taxes cut. And the justification is that they don't have children in schools anymore, so they should not have to pay for it.
He just used an example of elderly people using EMT services, and because they use EMT services, they should pay for his children's school. And he's not even mentioning the fact that his children are going to inherit a whole bunch of bond debt, whereas the elderly's children did not.
Even though older people in the past had to pay for their children's schools, their decision is that because they don't use the schools, they shouldn't have to pay for them anymore. And what the net result means is that people who are younger, who don't get a property tax homestead exemption, even though their property values are also exploding, not only will have to pay property tax, they will have to shift the burden of school taxes onto them. This is the type of hidden nonsense.
Some more hidden nonsense is the fact that it doesn't matter what age you are. A homestead is for primary residences. So if you live in the home, you get a homestead, despite what this maniac is saying young people get a homestead too. This guy's out of his mind. Let's keep going.
Having a family in this country becomes unaffordable. And these are the types of people who vote. And it's like, I'm so enraged by it because I'm watching this happen in every state across the country. New York State, by the way, very similar homestead exemption. This elderly exemption tax is built on this idea of so-called fixed income. And the theory behind it is that people who are on Social Security should not be, quote, forced out of their homes. Now, first of all, they get a cost of living adjustment from the Social Security Administration of inflation.
You guys see, he hates boomers. This guy hates boomers, and he's blaming them for everything. One last segment.
all of these millions of people moving from across the country for affordable housing to send their children to school. They're now going to have to be stuck with more of a bill because these elderly people don't want to pay for their children's school. We all live in a society. And just by the way, you know, in terms of this whole like, well, we don't use the schools, so we shouldn't have to pay for them.
I mean, so far, yeah, that's kind of good point. Why would they have to pay for that if they're not using it?
I'm not morbidly obese. I don't go on dialysis. 1% of the whole federal budget is for dialysis. I am not a Medicare recipient, a Social Security recipient. I don't get any sort of exemption. I can't opt out. By the way, do you know how many childless people? I know I lived where I currently live now for years with no children and didn't use the schools. I still had to pay the school tax. Childless people all over the country have to pay school tax if they're under the age of 65.
Let's just look at the math, and I want to show you the differences in what this guy is talking about. And first of all, understand that it doesn't matter if they're 65 or plus, they're still going to pay property taxes to the school districts. It just gives them a deduction. It makes them pay a little bit less tax. Now, this did pass, and I want you guys to understand that there was already a homestead. So here's the current, okay? So I have here, and also I highlighted homesteads are for primary residences. So if you live in your home, you qualify for it. Now, Texas Tax Protest is saying that the average tax rate in Texas is between 1.6 and 1.8. I'm just going to use 1.6, even though that my property tax rate is double. The current plan before this passed was everyone, doesn't matter their age. This guy's missing the big point. He is exempt. He is exempt. You just have to file your homestead. The current one we had for everyone was $100,000, which roughly saved people at a 1.6% tax rate $1,600 a year. And that was for everybody. Now, as it stood, if you were 65 or older, you got an extra $10,000 off your assessment value, which would save you $160. So is this guy really beating up boomers for saving an extra $160? Absolutely shocking. Now, here's what happened with the proposed bill that passed. It increased from $100,000 to $140,000 for everybody. Doesn't matter if you're 65, you just have to live there. So everyone got an additional $640 off a year, bringing the total savings for everyone to $2,240. Why didn't he say that? Why did he just keep it about boomers and how they're screwing everyone? I will say that 65 or older did get an additional benefit going from $10,000 to $60,000. So if you're 65 or plus and disabled, you need a little bit of help. You're going to save an extra $800 per year. Now, when we look at school tax versus EMT tax, just using Godly as an example, the total tax rate is $1.28 per $100. The total tax rate for emergency services is 10 cents per $100, meaning when we compare the school tax to the EMT tax, it's $1,285 a year for school tax and $100 a year in EMT services. And this clown is blaming the elderly for using those services. What about the 12 times higher expense for his children? And that's not even talking about the bond debt. Melody, why do you think that young man is saying those things?
I think it's part of this, what I see as a concerted effort to create divisiveness between the generations, so that we're fighting one another instead of fighting these taxes. I'm so tired of that personality type, the slick, they act passionate, but it rings false. Like you can tell it rings false, and they don't use facts. Like I'm so tired of people not using facts. Like just be clear in what you're saying. Instead, he's acting emotionally. And what I mean is he's performing emotion for you guys. That's not authentic. That guy doesn't have to worry about this stuff. It's part of, and does he know it? I don't know. He could be just another useful idiot. I've been a useful idiot in my life, where I've fallen for some of these tricks. But this is meant to obfuscate the issue. I can't remember who wrote about this recently, but it's like whataboutism, where it's like when you try to talk about one issue, they'll say, well, what about the young family that doesn't have children and they still have to pay this tax, instead of like focusing on the actual issue at hand. And so I just think this is a tactic to keep us screaming at one another instead of fighting the real issue.
What are you doing differently to combat that narrative?
Putting the facts out there as best I can. And unfortunately, what we understand is that we don't have a lot of good data. As much as we have all this data, it's not good data. But I'm putting the facts out there so that other people can really decide for themselves. So doing a ton of research and due diligence to provide an alternative perspective to a lot of this algo-driven effort to divide us.
Yeah. Melody, can we end with maybe some closing words of encouragement from you to potential homeowners of the future?
Yeah, this is the time, as I think you said at the beginning, it is the most unaffordable housing market, and you just have to hold on. Like, I had a follower comment on my Substack last week about that, he's now got like a huge boat, a house, all this stuff because he was able to buy at bottom prices, like during the last crisis. Like, he had saved, he was one of the lucky ones, Travis, because I think during these cycles, it's about how old you are often, where, they get you in because you're at that start of life and you think you have to have that home to sort of that as a metric of your success and that kind of thing. And he was one of the people that didn't fall for it last time, and now he's been able to benefit by buying at rock bottom prices back during the crisis. And so, hold on, guys. Like, you only live once. You don't want to wake up 10 years from now and be completely destitute. Like, be prudent, do your due diligence, save your money. Don't put the phone down, stop, participating in the FOMO and also the self-pity. Like, I'm sorry, like, we all want to own, we do. But guess what? What you have to do if you want to own is you have to work really hard. And sometimes that means taking on another job, to save your money. That, Travis, you and I work a lot of hours of the day,
Yeah.
we really never stop. And that we're doing that to be able to provide for our families and not, not become debt slaves. So unfortunately, the message is not there's a pill to take and it's all going to be good. It's that there are decisions you have to make, and you will get there. You will absolutely get there. But let me just tell you that home is not going to solve all of your problems. In fact, you'll just have new ones. And so you just need to be prepared for those new problems and know that you're actually financially in a place to afford them. But there is hope out there, guys. Like, we are seeing it. And the reason it's not in the official numbers right now is because we don't have enough transactions. Like, we have that distress is transacting. I'm seeing it in my client books as well. But when the other part of the market that's transacting are the really rich, that are those really high priced homes. And so you can have a local market where suddenly the median goes up, but that's not actually reflective of what's happening in that market. And that's the nature of a median price. But what we're seeing on all of these listing sites, price cuts, price cuts, price cuts, price cuts, they have to sell for us to see what the true impacts are. And I think that we are way closer than we've been in a long time to actually start seeing that reflected in the official numbers.
Very good, Melody Wright. And for the viewers, if you liked what Melody had to say, if you appreciate just data-driven analysis and not some super pushy salesman, do not forget, go to her Substack. It's going to be linked in this description and also be on the ending credits of this video right here. And other than that, guys, show her some love, comment below, share this video. And if you're out there investing in real estate, you guys already know we wish you luck and we hope you win.